On Thursday, Bob sat down at the table and gazed at his Miller Lite bottle. He opted to purchase just a six-pack because he didn't wish to become overly intoxicated if the evening ended soon. When the music upstairs halted, he realized his spouse was nearly ready. Typically, Bob stayed late at work on Thursdays since his partner attended gatherings with her acquaintances. His folks looked after their child Casey, while his spouse went out with her colleagues. Bob remained to complete his tasks ahead of time so he could dedicate Friday to his family. Everything appeared to be well organized. He carved out time in his hectic agenda. His parents cared for Casey, and his wife had fun with her pals. At least that was his impression. Hearing his wife head to the restroom reminded him of his recent lunch with Vicky the previous Tuesday. He pondered the need to visit the shop more often or to ask about delivery for those excellent sandwiches. Positioning himself to keep an eye on the entrance, he soon noticed a known figure entering the diner. Watching her scan the room, Bob stood up and signaled to her. She saw him and approached. At 31, Vicky was the most senior among his spouse's past partners. Bob had a soft spot for her and observed she was the sole married individual in the group. She had a talent for easing conflicts without yielding easily. Admitting to himself with her dark curly hair and pale skin, Vicky was rather attractive, even if she wasn't voluptuous. She had a beautiful visage and long legs. Her spouse, Ron, saw her as a divine blessing, a feeling he returned. As she took a seat opposite him, she expressed her gratitude to Bob for the rendezvous. "I'm aware of how occupied you are, Bob. I'm grateful for your time," she articulated, locking eyes with him earnestly. "It's okay, Vicky," Bob responded, "though I must admit meeting you here without Sharon is somewhat awkward. I prefer to dine with my partner, but since it's about Sharon, I'm all ears. I assume you're scheming something for her birthday next month." Bob was not prepared for the sorrow in Vicky's eyes upon mentioning their meeting or Sharon's birthday. "What's the issue? Vicky, I know you and Sharon cherish each other profoundly. I've seen enough to understand your connection. That's why I'm here. It may risk our friendship, but if it can help save your marriage, I'm in." "There's no simple way to say this, but Sharon has been involved with someone else for 2 months now," Vicky disclosed. Bob was shocked. "This must be a prank, a very cruel one," he said to Vicky. "I'm truly sorry, Bob, but it's no joke. Around 3 months ago, after you embarked on your current project, Sharon started feeling despondent. She's been grumpy at work and more disinterested than usual when we're out. After a couple of martinis, she confessed to missing you and feeling neglected. She also mentioned feeling as if you two were just an average middle-aged couple." "Watching life pass you by," Vicky explained. Just then, the waiter arrived to take Vicky's order. She chose a Cobb salad and lemon iced tea. Bob was still digesting the news about his wife's clandestine actions in their 8 years together. Bob was certain his wife would share with him if she was upset. He trusted they were always open about their emotions, even during disagreements. He urgently turned to Vicky, whispering, "Did she sleep with him?" "No, not that I'm aware," Vicky answered. "And from what I know of your wife, she typically shares everything with you. That's why her actions puzzle me, Bob. You should know, every woman I've spoken with says the same thing. I wager you both often discuss feeling swamped by daily life or something along those lines." When Sharon mentioned it, we all empathized and reminded her that she's a gorgeous woman and that you should give her more attention. "Regrettably, my sister was there that evening." "What does your sister have to do with this?" Bob inquired, attempting to suppress his frustration. "Truthfully, my sister tends to be quite flirtatious," Vicky responded. The server who delivered her tea lifted an eyebrow at her remark. Vicky took a drink and continued, "Both of my parents were unfaithful. It's unclear who was unfaithful first, but they constantly sought retribution against each other. At 17, I questioned why they remained together, and they reacted as if I was speaking a foreign language. They claimed their love for each other was all that mattered. This impacted my sister and me in different ways. I understood that betrayal ruins relationships, whereas my sister believed it was acceptable as long as there was love involved. I adore her, but she's mistaken. Nonetheless, back to the main point, my sister, Gary, argued that if she doesn't find affection at home, she ought to look elsewhere. I disagreed with her, but then Hannah and Gail began to talk about seeking better companions and maintaining secrecy. For them, it seemed to be purely theoretical, given they aren't married. Sharon mentioned she would never be unfaithful to you, but I suspect my sister's opinions introduced doubts in her mind." "Why do you think that?" Bob asked, now questioning Sharon's loyalty. He started to digest more of the information. Hearing all this wasn't easy, but Bob has always valued knowledge as a form of strength. The week after, Luke Jonas and his crew joined them at the Red Horse Tavern. Sharon insists she didn't invite him, but she had shared our group's dance plans with him. Adding more people to a new activity is typically enjoyable, except when Luke is involved. Now, knowing his name, Bob recognized that understanding is power. Vicky noticed Bob's firm tone and smiled subtly. Luke Jonas is well known for pursuing women. He shows interest in anyone who appears susceptible to his advances, regardless of their marital status or appearance. He simply loves the pursuit. He noticed your spouse immediately but didn't approach her until that night. Now, he's trying to catch her attention, but she's not confronting him. Everyone is aware that if Luke is accused of another scandal, he'll be fired. She has the power to stop him but chooses not to. They've frequently been seen conversing in the cafeteria for months. I attempted to discuss it with her, but she became defensive. She insists they are merely friends and that Luke is a good listener and supports her through her troubles. I questioned whether she'd behave the same in your presence, and she turned red, acknowledging she wouldn't. Then she became irritated and complained about you not paying attention to her. After that, I decided to step back and keep an eye on her. Things seemed to settle down at work, and I thought we were back to normal until the incident 3 weeks ago. As Vicky's meal arrived, she began to eat. Bob, observing his reaction, drank his lemonade, his mind drifting. He wondered why he should be upset about her interactions with another man, given he's not excessively jealous, simply because he loves and trusts his wife. Considering whether he had been too engrossed in his work project, he acknowledged the potential rewards but speculated if he had pushed too hard. His curiosity about the event 3 weeks prior persisted. Did he truly want to know? For the next 5 minutes they ate quietly as Bob pondered Vicky's disclosures. Without a doubt he was upset. She had no reason to be so intimately involved with another man, yet he could somewhat understand her perspective. If he had been more observant, maybe none of this would have transpired. By not informing him about her flirtatious behavior, she was essentially concealing the truth. Indeed, it was a concealment by omission, but for the moment he was willing to overlook her actions and concentrate on amending the situation. He planned to talk to her and express his concerns. If she's forthright and agrees to keep her distance from Luke, they could progress. Until now, he hadn't observed any lasting harm, unless, of course, something significant happened in the last 3 weeks. Tell me, what occurred 3 weeks ago? How severe was it, he inquired, now feeling more confident. He believed he was prepared to handle it. Vicky gazed at him with understanding. This is when the situation worsens, Vicky began. 3 weeks prior, we returned to the Red Horse Tavern to enjoy some dancing. Luke and his companions joined us, and together, we all danced, relishing the moment. Sharon consumed more drinks than she normally would, and Luke continued to offer her beverages throughout the evening, causing her to become exceedingly intoxicated. Accompanying her to the restroom, I discovered she was significantly more inebriated than I had assumed. Exiting, she was clutching her undergarments, proclaiming her desire to feel liberated while under the influence. I associated her conduct with the alcohol and aided her back to our seating area. I started to convince Hannah and Gail to assist me in escorting Sharon to my residence to prevent her from going home in such a drunken state. However, I observed Sharon and Luke engaging overly closely, brushing against each other and mimicking romantic gestures on the dance floor. Following the collective dance, the remainder of the evening seemed to fade into the background. I saw Sharon slip the underwear into Luke's pocket at the conclusion of a melody, an act that the entire bar noticed. Whistling filled the tavern as Luke flashed a broad smile and proceeded to plant a passionate kiss on her. One of his friends captured the moment on a smartphone. I had wished for Sharon to resist, but she complied with it, especially upon noticing Bob's reaction. She apologized, expressing regret. His mouth agape, he had to excuse himself, stuttering as he rose and retreated to the restroom, claiming he needed a moment to douse his face with water and firmly grasp the basin. He reminisced about the night Sharon returned late, around 2:30 a.m., after Vicky had phoned to inform him she would stay with her due to her excessive alcohol consumption. This was not a new occurrence, and Bob was always thankful that Vicky and the others made sure Sharon avoided a DUI charge. He recollected the intense intimacy they shared that night, detecting a variance in her demeanor. Snapped back to the present, he felt a sense of betrayal and preparedness for a dispute with another individual. Upon his return home, he pondered, what if she was thinking of him during our moments together? Regaining his composure, he rejoined the table, noting the empathetic look on Vicky's face but uncertain of how to proceed. His meal remained untouched as he sought further details from Vicky. Honestly, Bob, that's pretty much everything, she answered. The recent pre-wedding celebrations took place at Hannah's residence, featuring wine and a lingerie presentation. At work, Sharon appears aloof with Luke, yet he persists in his attempts to woo her. I believed it had concluded, but just the other day I caught them conversing. They ceased when I neared, so I'm unclear about the specifics. I felt you should be aware since she ceased heeding her friends, Vicky elucidated as the server presented the check. Bob swiftly took it and looked for his payment card. I wish to observe their interaction and possibly deter them right away, he proposed. Sharon mentioned you ladies are visiting the Red Horse Tavern again this week, so I plan to be there this Thursday to watch from afar. He paused briefly, noting Vicky's worried look. Did I say something amiss, he asked. Hannah has a medical appointment early Friday and Gail is off to see her brother in Florida. If Sharon goes out on Thursday, she won't be with us, Vicky clarified, reaching over the table to hold his hand. I'm profoundly sorry, my dear, she said with regret. I know I shouldn't inquire if you're all right, but here's my home number. Feel free to call and speak to Ron or me. Her spouse was a marital therapist, so talking to him might be helpful. Thank you for the update, Vicky. I understand this is tough for you too, but I truly regard you as a kind individual and a loyal friend. I'm uncertain about the future, but I'm conscious of our current situation and I'm ready to take certain steps. Thank you once again. Bob voiced his appreciation, stood up, settled the bill with his card and left. The upcoming Wednesday marked a significant day for Bob's project. They had located a company in Harrisburg capable of supplying the necessary components, allowing them to commence the project 2 months ahead of schedule. Even though the transport was not dependable, they ensured they had sufficient components for at least 7 days. With just a couple more telephone calls, they could conclude the project 2 months ahead of schedule, which would result in substantial savings for the armed forces. Bob was aware that he'd receive a significant bonus and his standing would greatly improve due to the project's triumph. Yet instead of feeling elated, Bob felt anxious about returning home. He had an important discussion pending with his spouse but kept delaying it. He decided to inspect her electronic mail to discover if he could uncover anything, even though he doubted personal matters would be discussed through her work email. He examined her Yahoo mail but found nothing out of the ordinary. Nonetheless, she might have another account he was unaware of until he could check their domestic computer. Bob recognized his technological limitations, understanding that purchasing surveillance cameras or setting up voice-activated microphones seemed attractive in theory, but he had already devised a backup strategy. He intended to collect as much data as possible to assess the effort needed to either mend or end his marriage. Sharon had already distanced their daughter, Casey, from his parents and had coaxed him into buying Chinese takeout. When he inquired about her preference, she remarked that after a decade together, with 8 years of marriage, he should already know of her affection for him. He couldn't help but reply with sarcasm, confirming that he just wanted to make sure she was still happy with their life together. His mobile vibrated immediately afterward, and she then asked for an extra roll, mentioning she missed it the previous day. Had it not been for the recent shocking news, he would have been thrilled to get home an hour early to spend time with his spouse and child. This opportunity to arrive sooner than usual, along with the accumulated weariness and stress, made it clear how Sharon could feel overlooked. However, this did not excuse her behavior. As he entered the home, he noticed his wife reaching for a wine bottle. He stopped to simply admire her form. At 31, she represented the peak of femininity, standing 5 feet tall, with curves that were unmistakably appealing, even in baggy sweatpants. Her well-defined posterior was noticeable, and with her hair pulled back into a ponytail, she turned and gave him a bright smile, reminding him of his immense luck in having her. Then reality struck. "I'm so glad you're back, darling." "How was work?" she greeted him, kissing him on the mouth. "Quite good. We've had a significant advancement with some supplies, so we might wrap up the project at least a month sooner than planned," he replied. "My love, I realize I've been away a lot because of this project. It's unfortunate that I can't share the specifics since they're confidential, but I want you to understand that you and Casey are my main concern, and I'll do everything to protect us," he reassured her, looking into her eyes. Did he sense a bit of regret or guilt? Or was it just his imagination? It was one of those instances where he regretted his difficulty in understanding people. Known for being candid, he favored straightforward communication and expected the same from others. Although his approach might seem harsh at first, people valued his sincerity and straightforward demeanor. This approach had been effective for him for 34 years, and he saw no reason to alter it, until now. "Ah, my dear," she replied, "we both love you and understand. I do wish you were here more, but I'm aware it's only for a short while. Yet I appreciate your recognition." She appeared close to crying. Was she genuinely upset, or was it an act? "So what does finishing the project ahead of schedule mean for you?" she inquired, pulling food from her bag. "Well, firstly, it means a sizable bonus on top of my pay. I'm not exactly sure how much yet, but it will be a decent sum. Moreover, if we perform well on this government project, it could lead to more opportunities for our company. And since I'm leading the project, there could be more chances for me to collaborate with other government contractors who require my expertise." The managers are aware of the situation, so I might be in a position to negotiate additional perks if everything proceeds according to plan. It will be extremely gratifying, he explained while attempting to consume his sweet and sour pork using chopsticks before surrendering and switching to a fork. Didn't I bring this up earlier? He inquired amid mouthfuls. I don't think so, dear, she answered. All I recall is you talking about a major contract you were not able to share details about, but it seemed hopeful. And since that conversation, our discussions have been quite limited, she observed, looking somewhat disheartened before brightening up. However, it seems my spouse will be returning shortly, she added, her voice taking on a more cheerful note. He glanced at her. Time for some fishing. So which tavern are you girls planning to visit tomorrow evening? Should I drop by after work to check if you're all fine to drive back, he proposed, trying to sound nonchalant. Actually, we've opted for the Red Horse Tavern for some group dancing, but we'll probably wrap up before you get off work, she stated, her attention momentarily drifting to her orange chicken. At that instant, his spirits dipped. Casey finished her egg roll and asked for bedtime stories. He cleaned his plate and washed it under the tap before picking up his daughter and taking her to the living room. For the next hour, he entertained his child by narrating one tale after another until she fell asleep. A gentle snore was heard from the couch where he noticed his spouse asleep, her book forgotten in her lap. Picking up his daughter, he went upstairs to her room, placed her carefully on the bed, and tucked her in warmly under the blankets, pondering over the day ahead. Tears filled his eyes as he wished for his daughter to retain memories of these joyful evenings spent with her parents instead of the challenges that were on the horizon. Drying his eyes, he went back downstairs to where his wife was sleeping on the couch, kissed her softly on the lips, and draped a blanket over her to protect her from the cold. Then he went in search of her phone, finding it charging in a wall outlet in their bedroom. Unlocking it with a swipe, he started browsing through her text messages, quickly locating the ones he was searching for. He reviewed their conversation over the last 3 months, him saying, "Hey, gorgeous, watching you and the girls dance last night was a blast." And her responding likewise. "Bob's busy on Thursdays and the in-laws look after Casey, so we girls had our night out. Your spouse seemed supportive, allowing you some leisure time," he commented. "Yes, he's wonderful," she replied. The text remained harmless for a while until this exchange. She mentioned, "Vicky spoke to me today regarding our lunch hours. I was annoyed, but she noticed everything." He responded, "Indeed." "I don't want any misunderstanding," she added. She questioned if Bob would be comfortable with our behavior, making me realize we might be projecting the wrong impression, and I shouldn't be sharing all my issues with another man. I need to speak with Bob. To which he said, "I understand, but if he's not attentive, you can always rely on me. I'm here to take you out for dinner as a friend." If necessary, Bob couldn't recall her attempting to discuss anything, possibly during his search for food-grade stainless steel for a project. He had spent days finding a provider who could supply what he needed, possibly overlooking significant events. But now, going through her messages, everything seemed harmless, yet it was blatantly evident to him that the other man was overstepping boundaries. How could she be oblivious? Scrolling further, he saw more messages, her stating, "You need to return them today," and him asking, "What are you referring to?" She replied, "You know exactly. My friends are livid with me at the moment, and I understand their feelings. If Bob discovers I acted improperly, he might end things with me," to which he responded, "So you'd prefer I not show him the video?" "What video?" "No one at work should see that," she exclaimed. She responded that Sam was present, and he captured a video on his mobile. "I'll ensure he removes it, but you're indebted to me," he stated. "Okay, I cannot afford to lose Bob, especially following last evening," he expressed. "What transpired last night?" he inquired. "It's none of your business," she replied. He remained silent. Was he irritated because you arrived home late and under the influence, he teased. "Very amusing, no. Let's just say an event occurred that completely altered the situation and leave it at that," she suggested. "So your risk dancing with me necessitated you to seek your husband's pardon. He ought to be grateful to me," he remarked. "You're contemptible. Last night was memorable, and it's because Bob and I share love. Now return my undergarment and make sure that video is gone," she demanded. Damn. It seemed as though I was portraying an elegant lady. "Bob is too good for me," she lamented. "No, he's lucky to have you. He was watching over you, wasn't he? I'm certain he's a decent man, but you tend to venture out solo," he observed. "I don't require anyone to supervise me." "Just be the ally you claim to be and attend to my request, please," she pleaded. "Sorry, of course I'll help you. And afterwards you can invite me to dinner. Just ensure this video remains unseen, and I'll do anything you desire," he proposed. "Nothing more until last Monday. I heard the bachelorette festivity was called off." "How about dining with me?" he suggested. "Not a good plan. Sorry," she declined. Come on, your husband will be occupied with work, and the ladies have left you by yourself. One evening with a pal, and we can converse like old times in the school dining area, he persisted. Besides, you're in my debt, he reminded. Fine, I'll join you at the Red Horse at 8, she consented. No, meet me at TGIF near the Sharon Hotel. They serve fine beverages, and I prefer not to be hassled by inebriated patrons. If we drink excessively, I'll secure a recounted. Okay, but it's solely dinner among friends. I'm grateful you ensured the video remained unpublished. It's troubling enough that our colleagues are aware of this incident, she acknowledged. Don't fret over it, he reassured. I witnessed Sam erasing the video. Soon, someone else's actions will overshadow this, and you'll recover. See you at 8, he comforted, realizing this could signify the demise of his marriage. How often had he observed his wife arranging a rendezvous with another man at a hotel's dining spot? How could this possibly end well? How was she oblivious to the implications of her actions? He ceased browsing the messages, connected his phone to the charger, disrobed, and settled into bed solo. Sleep was elusive for an extended period. On Thursday, she descended the staircase donned in her sleek black dress, her usual choice for their outings. She looked ravishing. Noticing him at the table, she was surprised. I didn't foresee your early return today, darling, her voice wavering slightly. We need to discuss, Sharon, he declared, his tone empty of feeling. Please have a seat, he urged. She sat, visibly tense, and reached for his hand as was customary, but he pulled away. I'm aware there's no bachelorette party tonight. I'm aware of your affair with Luke Jonas, he stated. Allow me to explain, she attempted. But he cut her off abruptly, pounding the table. Damn it, Sharon. Listen. You will not speak until I've finished, he yelled. She shrank back, tears brimming. He looked at her coldly and resumed, as I mentioned. I'm aware you kissed that fool at lunch. I know about your dance with him at the Red Horse Bar. I'm aware you removed your undergarment and handed it to him after some suggestive dancing. I'm also aware that your affection towards me 3 weeks ago was due to your excitement for him. Moreover, tonight you have plans to dine with him at a restaurant in the hotel where your friend has made reservations. I just don't know if you've already been intimate with him, nor do I know what could possibly deter you if you haven't concluded, attempting to control his frustration. Sharon, you deceived me by withholding information about Luke, you were dishonest regarding your provocative dance, and you misled me about your outings with the girls. Honestly, I'm worn out, and my faith in you is in ruins. I'm uncertain if I even wish to mend our relationship. Your actions indicate a lack of commitment on your part. Thus, I lay out 3 choices. Raising one finger, he said. Choice 1, you depart to be with your boyfriend. Even if there's no intimacy tonight, our union is done. I will have no desire to repair it, raising a second finger. He continued, Choice 2, we remain here. And you attempt to persuade me our marriage is worth saving. Convincing me will be challenging as my trust is low. Yet, perhaps you'll manage, given my deep affection for you and our shared child. I'd say there's a 50% chance I'd be open to trying lifting a third finger, he offered. Choice 3, you bring me along tonight to confront your romantic interest. You must tell him to cease all communication with you, then allow us a private conversation for no less than 15 minutes. This scenario will gain my respect and increase my willingness to reconcile. If you've remained faithful, I commit to fully repairing our bond. But if not, this may be our only opportunity to possibly save our marriage, she appeared distressed, eyeing him in disbelief. Which do you choose? The query hung heavy in the silence that followed. She seemed to fight back nausea as she faced me. Bob, I'm deeply regretful for everything. Regarding who should lead, you or me, surprisingly, she was open to meeting with the other man. I hadn't expected her to opt for justifying her actions all evening. Her willingness to arrange this encounter somewhat improved my view of her, though she was still far from absolved. I grabbed the keys and escorted her to the car, courteously opening her door as was my custom. She looked on the verge of tears. As we set off, she turned to me with a soft voice. I've truly ruined everything for us, haven't I? Indeed, Sharon. You have, I answered, concentrating on the road. What can I do to amend this, she inquired. I considered it briefly, harboring a few suggestions. Primarily, you must be utterly transparent henceforth. It shouldn't even need mentioning, yet it appears you deem secrecy or deceit acceptable. Moreover, you must devise a method to rebuild. My trust in your words. How you'll achieve this, I'm unsure, but remember, you're the one who eroded our trust. Another point I presumed obvious, but I'll state nonetheless, I continued. He is to be completely erased from your life. If we are to continue together, you are to avoid any interaction with him at work, refrain from inquiring about his well-being, and if he appears at the same social gathering, you must exit. If departure is impossible, contact me immediately. Reject any beverages or presents he offers. Upon our return tonight, you'll disclose everything to me. I'm not interested in your justifications. I acknowledge my preoccupation with this project, so I accept partial blame if you feel resentful. Communicate any grievances to me. And finally, for now, arrange for marriage counseling. Should you wish to select the counselor, that's fine. Perhaps Ron has someone to recommend after I concluded. Her phone signaled an incoming message. She glanced at it, turning paler, and whispered, "It's him," wondering where I am. She handed over her phone without another word. I glanced through her text messages. There was some from earlier today. "Hey, I reserved a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe we can unwind after lunch. Bring your swimsuit," one read. "You can't convince me to drink enough to share a hot tub with you." "I won't bring the swimsuit," she replied. "We'll see. You know how you get when you drink." "Maybe you won't need a swimsuit," he answered. Then, she got another message. "Where are you?" "I'm waiting for you." "I had a glass of wine," she responded. "I'm a bit delayed. I have a surprise for you," he mentioned. "Oh, you brought your swimsuit." "Perfect," he reacted. I handed the phone back to my spouse. She read the messages and simply lowered her head. "You realize these messages don't support your argument, right? Just today's texts make it seem like you're planning to see him tonight. How much worse will it appear if I look further back?" I questioned, aware it would seem bad. "I guess I must ask," I began, "do you think your texts today were overly flirtatious? Do you understand how these conversations have broken all my trust?" I listened to her cry. "Bob, I promise I only planned to dine tonight. I never intended to sleep with him." I couldn't help but look at her as though she was naive. "Were you planning to hand over your panties after removing them, like a few weeks back?" I didn't think she could look any whiter. I was mistaken. "Sharon, we're nearly there. You might want to tidy up your makeup and think about what you'll say to Luke." "Oh, and stay away from wine," I advised. She pulled down the sun visor and grabbed a tissue from the glove box, starting to settle down, and ceased crying. She began to apply mascara. In a more composed tone, she said, "Bob, I understand why you think Luke was toying with me. Hearing you speak, I agree. But Bob, how did I overlook this? I admit I've chosen poorly recently, but I'm not ignorant. I've rejected more attractive and refined men than Luke, so why did he pursue me? This is one reason why I'm finding it hard to trust what you say now. Sharon, you're intelligent and gorgeous. You ought to see past these tricks. That's why I'm questioning if you complied willingly," I replied. "Ugh, imagine if I met a woman at a bar and lied to you, claiming I was going to dinner with her tonight. No wonder you're upset and wounded." Her complexion started to return, and her voice became slightly stronger. "Okay, I've made a mistake, and now I need to fix it. Thanks for giving me a chance," she expressed, leaning in for a kiss. But I turned my head, letting her kiss me on the cheek instead. "I'm not past this, not by a long shot," I stated. She looked at me, nearly in disbelief. "We typically display much affection. Hopefully we can return to that." "What should I tell him?" she inquired as we parked at the restaurant. Finding a spot, I turned off the ignition and let my irritation cool. "What do I want you to tell him, Sharon? Our relationship is just barely holding on because of your dealings with that fool. Your actions with him have damaged the foundation of our marriage. Our daughter might have to spend Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with me. I want this to be clear. So tell him whatever you wish I conveyed." She sat silently for a moment, then sighed and opened the car door. As we approached the restaurant inside the hotel, she seemed to reach for my hand. I didn't pull back, but didn't welcome her gesture either. We entered, and a lovely red-haired lady stood behind the small desk, asking if we were a duo. Before I could speak, my wife said we were looking for someone already there. The lead waitress acknowledged and suggested we scout the area. Unsure of the person's appearance, I depended on my wife for direction. She nudged me and pointed towards the back of the restaurant, where a man sat by the hotel entrance, absorbed in his phone. With resolved steps, she walked to the table and halted without sitting. The man looked up, noticed her, and smiled broadly. It took a moment for him to notice a man was with her. Seeing me, his smile disappeared, and his eyes narrowed. He's worried about our relationship, and after speaking with him, I have to concur. For the first time in our marriage, I've provided him grounds to question my loyalty. I'll exert effort to mend the rupture of trust spawned by my involvement with you. From this point forward, I desire to sever ties with you. There's no basis for you to call, text, or in any other way communicate with me. I take on the responsibility for leading our relationship to this juncture, and now I've made the decision to conclude it. My spouse is cognizant of my regretful deeds at the Red Horse Tavern. I will do all within my power to recover my bond with him, including notifying HR about the whole ordeal tomorrow. I'll inform them that any effort to engage me in non-work-related conversation will be met with disapproval. Now, I'll remain at the bar while my husband speaks to you. As she walked away, she bestowed a kiss on me. Before I could respond, she peered into my eyes briefly and murmured, "I'm sincerely apologetic I couldn't help but watch her as she approached the bar." Everything unfolded even more splendidly than I had hoped. Taking a seat across from the discomfited ladies' man, I couldn't resist evaluating him. Dark hair, lean figure, flawlessly attired. He might be deemed handsome, but appraising men has never been my forte. He seemed to be about my stature, though it was difficult to ascertain while he was seated. His prolonged stare at the wine glass on the table before him nearly validated my suspicions. It was time to stay composed. I sort of knew what I was aiming for, but needed to adapt as things progressed. Quick decision-making wasn't my strongest skill. "So you were surprised to see her in a swimsuit?" I queried with a mild smirk. "Do you truly think she disclosed everything to you?" he retorted with a grin. Now that this man was directly in front of me, I felt tranquil. This was a scenario I could navigate. "Actually, yes," I responded. "I've known this woman for a decade and been her husband for 8 years. I believe I understand her better than someone who's been pursuing her for 3 months. I continued to smile. The server approached to take my drink order, and I requested a double Johnny Walker Black on ice. "She really knows how to please a man," he remarked, still attempting to maintain a smile. He glanced at the wine he had already ordered for her. "Indeed, that's accurate," I returned, his grin more broadly this time. "But I don't think you're speaking from first-hand experience. Need pictures?" he jested, laughing. This man was attempting to rile me. I felt compelled to lean across the counter, but instead I chuckled. "You lack photographs. If she had been that intimate with you, you wouldn't feel the need to drug her drink. What do pretend aggressors use these days? GHB or plain old ecstasy?" It was a shot in the dark, but his stunned look dispelled any uncertainty. He recoiled as I leaned closer, now truly enraged. "You vile coward. I ought to thrash you right here, but I'm hesitant because I don't want to risk killing you. I have no desire to end up in prison." At this moment I presented my wife with 3 choices, and now I'm offering you 3. I pointed my finger directly at him. "First, you're leaving this instant. You will go and apologize to my wife, and tomorrow you will resign from your job. I assure you I won't pursue you. Then you will depart from the city." I held up another finger. "Second, you surrender to the police and admit to drugging my wife's beverage. Serve your penalty and steer clear of my wife. I'll be watching, but I won't hunt you down. Afterward you will leave the city." I raised a third finger. "Third, I've enrolled us both in boxing lessons. In 4 weeks we will step into the ring, sign injury waivers, and neither of us will exit until we're knocked out. Upon awakening, you still must leave my wife be and then exit the city." The server delivered my scotch just as I concluded. I took a deep swig and felt the sting. It was time to recollect myself. "You must deem me a fool to agree to any of these propositions," he sneered. I offered what I hoped appeared as a threatening smile. "Because you wouldn't want to spend your miserable existence constantly vigilant, fearing every time you head to your vehicle at night, pondering if I or one of my allies is concealed, prepared to fracture your limbs and obliterate your dignity with a baseball bat. Every time you open the door, you won't know whether it will be me or one of my friends who will burst in, restrain you, and remove your testicles. Each time you visit a pub, you'll be concerned whether I or one of my associates will tamper with your beverage and force you into indescribable actions before removing your masculinity. You won't take the risk because you're fearful, or so your spouse asserted after I had my encounter with her the previous evening. His complexion returned to normal. I took another gulp of whiskey, then reached into my pocket and switched on the voice recorder on my mobile phone. I wished he would record our dialogue. I should have organized this night more effectively. "You intended to drug my wife and attack her, you degenerate. Are you prepared to bet a lifetime of torment on me not making good on my threat?" It was the moment to draw him in. "The drugs were merely to prepare her for when my mates and I intended to engage with her this evening." I lost my composure completely. I managed to seize him by the shirt with my left hand and yank him towards me. I couldn't hit very hard with my right hand since I was seated, but I felt a satisfying snap as his nose fractured. He screamed, clutched his nose, and threatened to summon the police. I encouraged him to do so, calling him a scoundrel. I wanted the police to examine the remainder of my wine, analyze it, and hear the recording of his confessions. The police arrived at the scene in 10 minutes since 2 officers were dining nearby. They documented my version of events and collected the remaining wine and glass for analysis. They searched Luke and discovered a bag of white substance. He requested a lawyer and chose not to speak further. They reviewed my recording and confiscated my phone for evidence. It was difficult to listen, but Luke was discussing narcotics and plotting an assault. It was nearly 4 a.m. before Sharon and I could leave the police station following her testimony. One of the policemen spent almost 15 minutes commending me for preventing her assault. By the end, she was completely devastated. Luke was kept in police custody. We used her mobile to quickly notify my parents about the ordeal. They were understanding and pledged to look after Casey, deciding to bring her to the zoo. As we entered the garage and turned off the car, we looked at each other. She unbuckled her seatbelt and hugged me tightly across the console. I let her weep on my shoulder for a minute before gently pushing her back. Sharon, we still need to discuss things, but it's late and we should rest. Tomorrow, we'll both head to work and spend the day together resolving things. How does that sound? Yes, Bob, going to bed sounds amazing, she whispered softly, then asked, May I sleep next to you? Of course, darling. The next morning, I awoke and cuddled closer to her, hoping that everything might be okay. Yet, I was aware we still had several discussions ahead before deciding on anything. My hand was on her abdomen, and she moved it to her chest. I felt an emotional rush, but knew I had to pace myself. Sitting up in bed, I lightly tapped her flawless rear. Let's take a walk, I proposed. I don't want to delve into serious discussions on an empty stomach. Eventually, we showered together, which sped up our morning routine. Though tempted, I resisted going back to bed until we addressed our issues. We ate breakfast at the International House of Pancakes, talking about Casey and her imminent visit with my parents, keeping the mood light and positive. After finishing our coffee, we paid the bill and returned home. We sat at the kitchen table to begin our talk. Okay, I'll start, I commenced. You've seen the kind of individual Luke is, so I won't dwell on that, he mentioned. You made him happy and called me a teddy bear after you were with him a few days back. Is that accurate? No, she answered. The worst that occurred between us was that awful night at the Red Horse. I acknowledge my mistake. But it didn't go beyond that. How can I believe you? I inquired. You lied about going out with him last evening, and you've omitted details about what transpired at the pub, not to mention your entire interaction with him, I observed, feeling it was time for candidness. I've contemplated this matter. I proceeded and made a proposition. How about a polygraph examination, she proposed. You're referring to a lie detector test I made clear. She nodded affirmatively. Organize one, question me however you desire, just inform me of the day and location. Her sincere demeanor was notable. I recognize these examinations aren't completely reliable, yet I'd be more at ease if you would just come clean. I'll explore what options are available. Organizing it may require some time, but it's worth considering, I replied. Actually, setting it up could take more time than anticipated, I mentioned further. She grinned. That's a fine initial step. We can assess the degree of your participation afterward, but my forthcoming query will likely be the most difficult. It's the one that pains me the most and greatly affects our bond. How do we progress? The episode with the underwear made you feel ashamed, and I grasped that. I dislike it, but I comprehend it's tough for me to come to terms with the fact you became close to another man without informing me. However, if you believed it was merely a friendly relationship, I can grasp that. What I can't fathom, and what prompts me to consider leaving before I'm wounded anew, is when you claimed you were seeing other females while you were actually dining with him. An outright falsehood, ignoring the aftermath, yet it shattered my heart when you mentioned you were dating others. I could see tears in my eyes, yet I felt helpless. Bob, all I can do is elucidate my thought process at that moment. Firstly, I must express my profound regret for deceiving you about everything. When you embarked on that project, for the initial time since our relationship began, I felt neglected. I'm not pointing fingers at you or your job. I understand the reasons you accepted it and its significance to you. I'm merely sharing my emotions. I began to feel disheartened, and then my sister Vicky made a remark that resonated with me. She advised seeking affection elsewhere. I never perceived it as betraying you. I recognized that while you were preoccupied with the project, I might discover what I was lacking elsewhere, and then Luke appeared. I didn't fully acknowledge it, but he made me feel valued. He inquired about my day, my family, my interests. Our dialogues were predominantly about me, she exhaled, glancing at my reaction, though I attempted to conceal it when Vicky conversed with me during lunch. I realized what I was doing. I was exploiting Luke to attain what I believed I wasn't receiving from you, but I still wished to mend our relationship. On the night things deteriorated, I didn't invite him or his acquaintances. They arrived before my other pals did. Luke purchased beverages, including for me. I became more intoxicated than I've ever been with you. I've committed some severe errors, as you're aware, but then we experienced an incredible evening, which left me even more perplexed. How could I behave so indiscreetly with him yet then share such remarkable times with you? She rose to fetch herself some water, drinking half before proceeding. Subsequently, the video emerged. I was aware you'd be incensed, and rightfully so, if you had become inebriated and kissed another lady. I'd be infuriated too, and I knew it would be worse. After our ardent encounter, you'd wonder if my thoughts were with someone else. Hence, I made another blunder. I attempted to involve Luke to disguise it. Possibly he suggested it, then ensured I felt compelled to assist him, and he wished to take me to dinner when my companions couldn't. I was lonely, assuming you wouldn't return until late. In a moment of vulnerability, I made a dreadful decision, and I'm genuinely apologetic. Our relationship has always been founded on trust, and I violated it. Tears rolled down her cheeks, though she didn't wail. "Oh my God," I uttered, standing to hug her. I kissed her gently, then drew back. "We're not yet at that point, and it will require time, but if you're fully committed, then my partner Sharon and I sought therapy for a period. Discussing my concerns aided me in overcoming them. A notable result for me was, given communication has been our forte since our initial meeting, we persist in improving it. Furthermore, the counselor suggested Sharon undergo evaluations for hormonal imbalances. At 31, it appeared premature for concern, but it turned out to be beneficial. Following several tests and changing birth control pills, she noticed improvements. Although we haven't fully returned to our previous state, we're in a favorable situation again. The polygraph examination verified her truthfulness in all the challenging inquiries I presented. While doubts about the reliability of these tests linger in my mind, I can accept the outcome. I opted to partake in boxing classes, whereas Sharon developed an interest in the self-defense courses available there. Thursday evenings for her transformed into self-defense nights. Sharon proposed that we enroll in martial arts classes where she thrives, and I find it challenging to keep pace. Sparring has evolved into our preferred method of playful interaction. A project was concluded 6 weeks sooner than anticipated and below the allocated budget. My firm is now in the running alongside significant contenders for government contracts. Even though there was an offer to elevate me to the position of vice president, I turned it down because of the hefty travel demands. Instead, I founded the Special Projects Division and currently lead it, which came with a new office and a secretary assistant. My new assistant boasts an impressive physique and a radiant smile, and she meets my requirements impeccably. So far, there have been no grievances regarding my spouse and me collaborating, as long as we continue to generate income. I suspect no one will express concerns. The majority of the $38,000 bonus from my initial project was allocated towards Casey's university fund, yet I reserved enough for a week-long retreat with my spouse at an all-encompassing resort. My parents will look after Casey in our absence. I was accused of assaulting Luke unexpectedly. Completing 40 hours of community service and settling a $300 fine was the most gratifying experience I've had. Luke received a sentence of 3 to 5 years for attempting to injure someone in possession of a substance known as gamma-hydroxybutyrate. He was assaulted on his way to his vehicle at night, but I wasn't the perpetrator. It was someone whose brother Luke had previously tormented. The assailant received a sentence of 2 to 3 years for the attack. I deposit $50 into his prison account monthly. A few weeks ago, my wife was unfaithful while attending a work training session. She was intoxicated and has battled with depression over the past few years. She cannot recall how it initiated or much of the event itself and hasn't been in contact with the other individual thereafter. She expresses deep remorse for her behavior, and when inquired if there's anything lacking in our relationship or something I need to work on, she says there isn't. She disclosed this to me the same week it occurred and has consented to begin therapy and resume her antidepressants. I've chosen to remain with her and resolve our issues. Before her indiscretion, we participated in sex parties and engaged in swinging, always adhering to explicit boundaries and rules, the principal one being mutual presence and consent. In this context, she has proposed I have a free pass to date and sleep with someone if I wish, as well as to pursue or indulge in some of my fantasies, such as FFM. Has anyone experienced a similar situation? What actions did you take, and what was the outcome? While the prospect doesn't displease me, I believe seeking revenge won't ameliorate our predicament, nor do I wish for her to engage in anything she's uneasy about out of remorse. I desire our mutual sexual adventures to be equally enriching. I feel deceived, furious, and sorrowful, but I've resolved to address this privately to aid her mental health recovery. The most challenging aspect is feeling like I've lost my closest confidant and the person I would normally confide in about such matters. Thank you for reading. Any guidance or advice is greatly valued. Thank you for joining us in this segment of Relationship Tales. If these stories touched you, press the subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you won't miss the forthcoming whirlwind of relationship narratives. Your support is incredibly important, and we look forward to sharing more gripping stories with you. Until the next time, remember, every relationship has a tale worth narrating. See you soon.